Well, hello there and welcome everyone to the Advisor's Edge podcast. I'm your host or co-host, Rob Jacomen, and I'm actually joined by two amazing guests today. We're doing a different format. You guys are going to love this show. I have on with me today, Scott Gill, who is the founder and CEO of Synergy. And we have Chad Ramberg, who's normally my co-host on the show, but we have a different format today. It's going to be exciting. We're going to talk about some really cool stuff. Chad, I'm actually going to turn it over to you to give us the intro of what we're going to cover today, what we're going to talk about.
Absolutely. So it's really exciting. Scott Gill's a fantastic guy. We talked originally, what was it? Back in 2021 when you launched Synergy. Yeah. Okay. And we had a really good conversation, but what the interesting thing is, Box Professional was launched in 2019. So both of us were in that mode of, we got to put our heads down. We got to make it happen, get things rolling. Cool thing was we circled back and ran into him at NAPFA Spring Conference. He did a fantastic presentation about scaling and growing your organization, which the funny thing about that was I was planning to have no more compliance firms on the podcast this year. But it was such a fantastic presentation. I said, man, Scott, I like you. I know you're a great guy. I want to have you on. But here's the challenge. The challenge is for me too, is for me not to talk about insurance and Scott not to talk about compliance. Everybody's going to know what we do anyway, but we're going to focus on growing and scaling a business. Is that fair?
That's fair. That's absolutely fair.
Now you guys are talking. That's right in my wheelhouse. I love it. Well, let's kick it off, Chad. Where do we want to go first? This is an exciting topic.
All right. Scott starts off his podcast with one big idea. And our big idea today really is, how do we take an organization from startup to scale? Well, that's a lot of different things diving into that. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. My theories on the topic are primarily derived from my experience in a professional services-based business, right? So that's the perspective that I bring. And I believe that it starts with expertise. When a business owner is an expert in their field, then that expertise establishes a foundational framework, if you will, for both the business's operations and the catalyst that'll draw your desired clients towards your business. And so being an expert in itself, in my opinion, is a solid marketing strategy. If you are able to execute on certain tasks and projects better than, say, 80 or 90% of the population, then folks will find you when they need those tasks and projects completed. And so when we start discussing scale, of course, that in itself, as we talked about earlier, is a topic that we could talk about for a couple of hours. But I think the key concept to address when preparing for scale is having a strategy for the things that you don't control, right? I talk a lot about how business owners have the tendency to be controlling, just the nature of a business. And one of the most difficult adjustments to make is learning to exercise swift and confident decision-making when dealing with circumstances that are outside of your control. And so many business owners tend to feel that they can't impact what they can't control. And nothing could be farther from the truth from my perspective. There are strategies that can promote healthy and decision-making processes, even in the absence of 100% control and in the absence of having 100% of the information that you need to make your decisions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the questions, Rob, you're going to be our moderator, if you will. And we have some questions we can dig into them. Scott, if you want to ask the first question, and then that'll help get us rolling. And by the way, I love the way that you're thinking about, where can we influence? We don't have control over most things, but how can we influence and help us get to a better spot?
Exactly. And as we think about that, Chad, I'd like to pose a quick question to you. So in your own business, you've gone from individual contributor to leading a growing business. So what sparked the idea to start your own firm?
Yeah. So love the question. And a lot of people don't ask me that question or in that way. And the way you came about it really leads me to one thing. The key reason that the Box Professional here is because I wanted to work in a different way. Okay. I was taught way back in 2010 about lean Kaizen development, and I wanted to use those methodologies in the growth and development of what I was doing. And where I was working, it was clear that wasn't really how they thought. It was a good, solid business and an organization. But I got that entrepreneurial itch, as some would say. And I said, you know what? I got to find out if my ideas have water or not. And so that's really, when the rubber met the road, that's really why I took the plunge. How about, I'm curious, for you and Synergy, what was that kind of key factor for you?
Well, I wanted to narrow the niche, right? I wanted to respond to the needs of the advisors that I was working with at the time. And I always joke around, but I would like to take credit for the original idea for our service offering. But in actuality, it was the firms that I was consulting with that let me know that they didn't want to learn about compliance. They wanted a consulting service that was designed to do compliance for them. And I'm the type of person who I can only hear so many times the same feedback from the same population of people over and over again before the signs are clear. And in my case, I knew it was time to build a service that empowers small to mid-sized registered investment advisors to spend more time servicing their clients and less time dealing with compliance. And so that's my professional answer. Personally, though, for me, it was about providing an example for my children, establishing the belief that your ideas alone have intrinsic value, and to never underestimate how valuable those ideas are when you pair them with a strong work ethic. And so I wanted them to know that, and I wanted them to see that.
I think that's fantastic.
I want to chime in here because both of you guys are talking my language of really specialization and going after a very specific area of expertise. And I think for anyone who's listening or watching right now, and that's the area where I focus the most on, is truly mastering a niche and providing a service that solves a very specific problem for your target market. And I think it's so important when someone's starting a new business, and I want to ask you guys this question: what is the most important thing that they should be considering when they decide to put themselves out there, start their business? What should be the first thing they focus on? Or what did you guys focus on initially? Did you always think about, hey, I need to specialize and go after a very specific niche and serve that niche at the highest level? Was that your thought process? Chad, we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah. So for me, it was first of all, I love working with advisors and in professional services, because all of us here are doing professional services, and financial advisors, same thing. The way they approach it, their ideas, very important. But for me, really what it was, know my client. Who was that specific client? What is important to them? And how do I build everything we do around them? Because the concept for us is, if we can't do that, well, we probably shouldn't be here, first of all. Second of all, if we do it really well, it's going to help augment everything, because let's face it, if the client doesn't find value in what you do, you're not going to be there. But if they really like what you do, your growth to scale is going to almost come naturally and almost push you through that development process.
Agree. And I think from my perspective, it was one simple question: if not me, then who? At some point, if you have spent thousands of hours learning about something and training and growing within that profession, right, at some point you should start to feel the responsibility to share that knowledge and to share that expertise with others that need help. And so I can honestly say that, again, that expertise, right, leveraging the power of that and understanding that advisors need help, I put in the time and the energy and gain the experience to be able to help them. If not me, then who?
I love that. Hey, Scott, I have a follow-up question for you.
Yeah.
In thinking about our audience and who might be listening or watching today, if you, knowing what you know about the RIA space, if you were a brand new RIA right now and you were looking to launch your business, where is the first place that you would start? And how would you advise somebody who's considering that decision right now? Where would be a great place for them to start in terms of, would you recommend that they really focus on a specialty and really look at the problems that they can help to solve for their ideal client? What would be like the ideal pathway if you were to start all over right now and become an RIA? What would you do?
This is a trick question because we said we weren't going to talk about compliance, right?
Correct.
But knowing what I know now, if I were going to start an RIA, then I would start with an examination document request list. And the reason why is because that examination document request list does not just touch on compliance items. It touches on every element of the firm's compliance program. And so while you're looking at that document request list, you're going to be evaluating what your process will be for gathering data, which leads you into the technology conversation. It leads you into that data aggregator conversation. You're going to be determining how you're going to separate your discretionary and non-discretionary accounts, which is going to lead you to selecting your custodian and reviewing their policies and procedures. And the document request list is going to ask you for your financials. So you may need a crash course in accounting before you start your RIA, because you're going to have a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet you're going to have to prepare. And they're going to ask you for a copy of your marketing materials. And so now you're looking at what social media pages you're going to have and what websites you're going to have. And the document request list, the books and records as a concept is so broad that if you just take a minute and ask yourself questions about books and records, you will find yourself touching areas that impact every area of the business.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds that's basically you walk through that process, you're going to have if you haven't already, you're going to have your business plan right there.
Yeah,
it has all those components in it. Yeah.
You're going to have to. The technology, I think, is where a lot of folks like to start. And I think that's a really great place to start. But internal processes, I think, is the biggest piece there. And in our last episode, we were very clear that do not select technology unless you are very clear about how that technology is going to feed into your business operation. And I think that's a key point as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, the tail wags the dog there. Your technology is driving what you're doing rather than you figuring out a good plan and then implementing the technology.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very cool.
Now,
Well,
Chad,
I'm curious. Yeah.
I have a question for you, Chad, because based on what Scott just asked, I think this is going to be right in your wheelhouse. Scott brought up internal process, and that is something that is so unique to your model. Can you speak a little bit about the importance of having that internal process and what you refer to as Kaizen? You want to go down that path now, or that's an important consideration when you're starting a business is what kind of process you're going to set up? What's going to be, how are you going to deliver that experience to a customer?
Yeah. So we're going to have some episodes in the future about Kaizen specifically. Okay. I think for your question, though, is a really good question. And the way I would essentially frame that is, okay, for us, yes, it's Kaizen, lean methodology, all of that. And that can be a lot of different things for different people. The key thing is I believe you should have a methodology of how you're going to operate your business. Okay. And that can be a lot of different things, but a reason for being, and then how you're going to operate, develop, and then grow from there. Because what my experience as an entrepreneur and going from startup to scale is really, I have to approach it differently at different times. Like I mentioned originally, Scott and I bumped into each other when we were both really hustling just to crack that nut, if you will, because just getting to forget about scale, just to get to sustainability is a big challenge initially. And then we go into that next phase where you say, okay, we're doing it on our own. Now, okay, we can shift and go from a solo founder into a team, which is, I'm curious for you, Scott, when you decided to do that shift, what happened there? What was going through your mind? Or maybe you planned it from the beginning. Tell me a little bit.
Yeah, so we began our primary programs in January 2021, as you said, and we reached our first 6 firms around May of that year. And I think it was at that point that I realized that I would need some help, right, within the business. There were some 60-hour weeks. And I always tell folks that are thinking about starting a business, if you're not willing to grind through a few 60-hour weeks, then you have to accept the fact that you may be leaving some meat on the bone at the end of the day, right? But to pinpoint that moment, I think it was the training or the lack thereof. Maybe I could call them brainstorming sessions that I had with the initial quote unquote team. But at the time, back in January 2021, we progressed forward to about May of 2021, and we had an attorney that was working with us part-time. And we brought in our first full-time team member in May of 2021. And the three of us had a think tank, right? We would meet at 8 a.m. every morning and work through the various elements of the business based on the original set of processes that I had designed. And I think at that point, it was when, excuse me. And I think it was at that point that I realized that the business was becoming much bigger than me and that we were on the path to scale. And another thought that comes to mind there, the real moment of truth was a couple of years later, around 2022, when I had to start to introduce my clients to other relationship managers within the business. The relationships that I have with clients have always been the pinnacle of the business. And so being at the point where I was forced to entrust those relationships to other team members in order to scale, I think that's when I realized that this is real. This is what we're doing.
Yeah. Wow. Handing over relationships is hard.
Extremely difficult.
What do you mean, giving away control?
Yeah.
No one can do it better than me. That's the kind of the thought process. When you're an entrepreneur, like that does run through your mind is if I relinquish control to somebody else, are they going to be able to do it as good as me? I don't know. And Scott, I think my follow-up to you on that one is, what's the importance of having those standard operating procedures or training with your team so that when they are executing and delivering that customer experience, it's really truly at a world-class level that you would expect yourself to deliver to a customer or a client?
Well, that's supremely important. Business process is challenging because it needs to be more than one thing at once, right? And this is what I mean by that. On one hand, right, you need the processes to be static. You need them to be consistent, because if the processes aren't consistent, then you can't measure. Right? You can't build your data points and you can't determine when things are on or off track. But on the other hand, your processes have to continue to evolve, right, to keep pace with the changing environment as the firm grows. So you've got something that needs to be more than one thing at once. It needs to be good enough for today, while at the same time be in the process of development for tomorrow. And that's the hard part about process in startup. Right? But it's supremely important to identify and create a specific set of processes and hold everyone within the organization accountable for executing according to those processes, and for management to have the data points available so that these items can be measured and tracked.
Yeah, Scott, one of the things is it is so hard to keep consistency, but also plan for improvements. Okay. And so one of the things we do that here, we call it standard work versus just process and procedures. And the standard work is how are we doing it today? Be super consistent with that. And then we develop and grow off of that. For you, what did you use to help? Usually when you're a small team, it's easy not to be consistent because maybe they're sitting right across from you. You can say, hey, John, or whoever it is, X, Y, or Z, let's go. And you just go do it. What did you do early on in that early team to help you figure out how to be consistent with a plan to grow and develop to the larger high performing team?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I focus on is what I call the 3 Ds: design, do, delegate. And I believe that is the responsibility of every business owner in a startup environment. Right? You have to design the original processes. Why do I think that the business owner needs to design the original processes? Well, it's because I think that in most cases, the business owner is the only individual within the business that has all the information. Right? And what I mean by that is you can hire a process manager and they can design steps 1 through 10 to get through something, right? But they may not know the technology budget, right, that would allow for a higher level of investment in that technology. Or your operations manager might be able to come in and provide some back office support on some processes, but they may not be aware of some of the client concerns that the consultants have been hearing in terms of their firm's compliance program. A lot of times the business owner, the expert in the business, is the only person that has all the information to design the process. Then you do the process. Okay? And that's the critical part. And the reason that's so critical is because when you do the process, what you're actually doing is you are establishing a baseline or a minimum level of productivity that's acceptable for that process. Right now, we're starting to talk a little bit about evaluating the team, but at the end of the day, The process has a purpose, and each step must be completed. And these steps being completed is the minimum viable product for the business.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're going through those processes, you're thinking through all those different pieces. Okay, would the clients be put off by this type of a communication? Or are we unable to connect these two systems to get the reporting on the dashboard that we need? And so as the business owner's thinking through those things while they do the process, then it's time to delegate. And so many times I see folks want to skip the first two steps. They'll bring someone into the firm. They'll start just throwing tasks at them. Tasks don't seem to connect to anything. There doesn't appear to be any consistency in the person's job title, and they get very frustrated. And honestly, I'm guilty of it. We suffered from that a little bit in the early days. But by designing the process, doing it yourself, and then delegating, now you have one of the questions I ask, one of the rhetorical questions I ask all the time is, how do you train someone to do something that you've never done yourself? And I think that's an area of focus that a lot of entrepreneurs can leverage as they go from startup to scale.
Yeah, I like the iteration of it.
Of course, that's my favorite book.
Yeah. I have a follow-up to you, Scott. One of the guys that I follow is a guy by the name of Dan Martell. And I read one of his books called Getting Back Your Time. And I think that's the title.
Buy Back Your Time.
Buy Back Your Time.
Yep.
One of the things he talks about is very similar to what you just described there is as you're doing the process is documenting and recording how you're doing it so that you can then make that transition so much easier and train someone else, have them iterate and do, and then you feel more confident in delegating that to that person so that they develop some mastery of those things. Is that one of the things that you would recommend for either a new entrepreneur or a seasoned entrepreneur who's struggling with that challenge?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that book. I actually have read through that one myself. And the connection that he creates in terms of how to calculate the break point where the owner of the business should no longer be executing a task, I think is absolutely brilliant. And I have been trying to leverage that. It's a little bit difficult, and we'll talk about that probably a little later. But basically just looking at the firm's overall revenue, right, dividing it by a factor of 8, and then being able to say, okay, if 1/8 of your revenue, if you could pay someone 1/8 of your revenue in order to do this task, then you as the owner shouldn't be doing it. That was a really key point in that book that I think was really cool. But yes, absolutely. That's exactly what he's talking about. There is a point in which the business starts to lose money when the owner or the CEO or the expert within the business does tasks that someone else could be compensated to do at a much lower rate. And I think that's a really key thing to consider as you are doing these processes.
Yeah. We think of the plan, do, check, act cycle, which is a lean cycle thing. Yours is a little bit tighter there, which is fantastic. That's cool. But here again, to circle back to what we were talking about before, you had a plan and a specific approach and a way that you are doing that development as you go, which is really cool. I think why we hit it off originally.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I have a question, Chad. This might be for you and Scott along these lines. Taking a step back, because it just dawned on me. One of the big things I think I know as a business owner myself, the big thing, the overarching thing is, what do you truly stand for? Because if you can communicate that vision to your team so that they can have true buy-in to the vision and where the firm is going and where the business is going, I think that plays a big part in developing that culture around your team and what you guys stand for. So Chad, how has that impacted your business in having that? Because I know you so well, obviously we work together. I know that's part of the essence of you, of what you're building. And it's very important for you to have that team culture. How important is that for you personally to continue articulating the vision of where your business is going and to have that true buy-in from your team?
Yeah, well, for us is really important. And we have, for me, it's really comes down to, you can have something posted on the wall of values and everything you want to do, but how are we going to live it, right? And for us, it's really about serving. For me, I think about serving our team members to help them serve the client. And so we start there. How are we serving those around us? And that can, okay, so for me personally, that's something I can take home and use it at home and use it in the business. For us, it's treasuring everyone every time and helping elevate them. And then how we enact that in our business is really the key way to do it. Another part of that is we want to have a little bit of fun. Now, in the work that we do, that can be a challenge sometimes, but we also have some team members that like to throw that in there and help us remember. It's so easy to get so focused on we got this task and that task, and it's really important for the client and all of that, but let's enjoy it a little bit. These are things that we have integrated into how we do our work, not just what we do. As you say, core values is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, love it. Scott, how do you feel about the really painting the vision and getting everybody in alignment? One of the guys on Chad's team is a rowing coach, and he talks about that one book, which is a movie about everybody being in sync and headed in the same direction, having that vision, and everyone's headed in the right direction. How important has that been for you in your business?
Absolutely critical. We are a 100% remote company. We always have been a 100% remote company. And so we've got folks all over the country. And what I realized in the early days was that there is a general lack of human connection when you have that, right? We've got team members that have been working for us for 8 months that have never physically met one another, right? And so what we started doing was we started to do an on-site. Right? So for the last couple of years, we fly everyone out to a centralized location. We all stay in a hotel for a week. We go out to eat. We do team building activities, and we rent out the hotel conference room, and we go through things. And one of the things we go through is our mission and our vision, and our core values. I think it's silly to expect team members to adopt and exercise your core values when they don't know what they are. Right? And the mission and the vision of the company is only as effective as each team member's ability to see their place in that mission and in that vision. So when we talk about mission and vision, my biggest focus is not just to tell you what the statement is. Our mission is to help small to mid-sized registered yada, yada, yada. Our focus is to say, okay, now that's the mission, that's the vision. Where do you fit in this? And we actually did a really awesome exercise. We were in Dallas about 3 weeks ago for our annual team retreat. We did a really awesome exercise. I told everybody, I said, look, resources out of the window. Perfect scenario. I want you to take a piece of paper and I want you to write down what your job looks like with Synergy 3 to 5 years from now. I said, I don't care if that job doesn't even exist yet. I don't care. I said, tell me how much money you think you'd be making. Tell me what your day-to-day would look like. Would you be managing other people or would you be an individual contributor? Sit down and write that down, because at the end of the day, and I didn't collect them and I didn't make people read them out loud. The point of the exercise was not to necessarily share. The point of the exercise is to make people think about internally how their individual career goals align with where Synergy's going. And I won't lie to you and say I do wonder with an extreme level of curiosity what they put on that paper.
Boy,
I still have no idea.
I would too.
I love it.
Yeah,
I wanted it to be a private process. I wanted it to be something that they thought about and that they took into the next few months. And something tells me that if anything urgent comes up along those lines, now they will feel more comfortable having that conversation with me had we not gone through that exercise.
Wow.
That shows courage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great courage to not ask.
Well, yeah. We'll see. We've got another one coming up right around the corner next year. And I may actually ask folks to share a little bit more, but this was the first time we ever did it. And I just wanted folks to feel like with the pace of change of the organization, it's really easy to feel like you're getting lost. And so I just wanted folks to know that I care the extent to which they see themselves in the future of our company. And I want them to tell me if they feel like we are growing apart. I always talk about how organizations are living and breathing organisms. Right? And just two people in a marriage, or just a father and son, mother and daughter, an individual can grow apart from the trajectory of the organization. My job and the challenge is for us to catch that. And if we can help repair that relationship, do so as quickly as possible. And if we can't, still handle that kind of a separation as amicably as possible. And that's the goal.
It's amazing.
Yeah. That's outstanding. I can see really how that helps to build the high performance team. How do you connect that to the day-to-day of because that's trust building and relationship building and all that. And you have to have that. Well, you don't have to, but it's certainly going to help.
Sure.
How do you connect that to the day-to-day? I got to get X, Y, and Z done. And so we're not dropping the ball as we're passing it back and forth, to use more of a soccer sort of a metaphor.
Yeah. So I always say that an open door policy has to work both ways, right? I remind my team members, you can come to me and you can tell me anything. You can tell me you don't believe the sky is blue, if that's what you want to talk about that day, right? But an open door policy is only as good as the willingness of the team member that you need to come through the door to open their heart and their mind and let you in their personal life, let you into how they feel, right? And I invite them to do, and I give other options on the team. Our director of operations, I don't know if she wants me to name her on the podcast, so I won't do it, but she is unbelievable. She is fantastic. And so I always say, listen, if you're not comfortable coming to talk to me about something, go talk to our director of operations about it. But please use the open door policy. And I think that's one of the things that, quite honestly, I struggle with the most, because I don't think people use it as often as they want to. They don't want to tell me anything sometimes. So just trying to read those cues and read those signs is really the best thing to do.
Yeah.
That's a great segue into my next question. And Chad, I'll ask you this because it's a great follow-up to this, is as business owners are thinking about growing their team, and I know you guys are talking about building the high performance team, but as you're thinking about adding on to your team, what are some things that you guys look for when you're assessing, here's the opportunity I need to fill, right? I need some strength on my bench here. And what qualities are you looking for in a new team member to bring them on board? And then I think the third piece of that is, do you recommend, or do you have an onboarding process to bring on to new team members and start to really integrate them into the culture of your organization?
Oh man, I'm a process guy, right? But we all fail somewhere.
Me too.
And I was just thinking, so our newest onboarding relationship manager is what we call the role. We don't have as good of a process as I would like. Okay. As we scale up and grow, actually, this is an area where we're going to be focusing. Okay. I'm going to pivot just a little bit here to use a lot of business terminology to move the question over where I'd love to talk. What you're talking a little bit about is measuring the capacity as we grow. How do we know when we need to add more people in this area or that area? And so that's really what we do here. Is there's two different ways I think of measuring that capacity. And there's the analytical, the quantitative, and the qualitative side of it. Okay, we have a very specific quantitative side of it where we are measuring how much work we're doing every single day. Are we on target for that? Are we improving how we do that? That helps us inform the qualitative side of that. What I mean by that is just yesterday, because we're at a great position right now where we're hitting our targets every 2 hours, 94% of the time. It's fantastic. Love it. The guys are feeling great. Okay. And the team is loving it. But at some point, if you're winning all the time, you got to challenge yourself to grow and develop. Okay. And so that is our analytical. The conversation with the team yesterday on our improvements call was, okay, guys, we're going to challenge ourselves a little bit here. And actually, because we're able to add capacity in what we're individually doing and as a team. But at the same time, I started to ask them questions for some qualitative side to see how they felt about it, because I want to make sure they're ready to go. I can certainly push them. And to be clear, when we were a smaller organization, there were times I needed to push team members to say, okay, come on, guys, let's get there. As we grow, I see some of our team members, and some of us, it's different ways for different days. They're pushing and sometimes they're pulling us along, right? So I want to try and see where each one of them's at and help. Because we have to here grow not only individually, but together as a team, because there's lots of passing the ball back and forth that we do to make sure our clients are getting the best they can. So that's how we approach it. And then I just told him, I said, in the end, yes, I'm going to this is what we're going to do, but I need your feedback, which is what Scott's talking about, that trust building cycle. And so taking it from the forest down to the trees and back again.
Yeah. I tell you what, Chad, I want to let you off the hook, man, on the training piece. That has been one of our most significant struggles as well. But I want to encourage you, sir, because I believe that for a lot of startups, the lack of an effective training program could actually be a good sign, right? And let me tell you why I say that. Let me tell you why I say that. So our primary, and this is why we've struggled with it, our primary objective, okay, is to adjust the business to the needs of the client. Right? As we continue to work with clients in our business, specifically as we go through regulatory examinations, those needs change. We quickly change the processes to fit those needs. When we change those processes, we have now lost the consistency that we would bring into our training program. So we're executing on June 1st. Okay. We learned something from a couple of regulatory exams in July and August. We changed the process in September. We hire someone in October. Okay. Now, we haven't yet solidified our new iteration of the processes, nor have we created the training materials by the time we make that next hire. So we are also in the process of finalizing and documenting some of our standard operating procedures so that we can create a training process, but it's not 100% a bad thing that we change our processes mid-cycle in a way that prevents us from having a solid training program. Just want to throw that out there. Okay.
Love it. I always need a little bit of grace.
We all do. It's just the way it is. I cannot tell you how many times I wrote our original processes going back to late 2020. And I go back and look at them sometimes, and it's laughable how different they've become over this period of time. And so that's okay. That's okay. As long as you're keeping your clients first, your clients are happy, then that's okay.
Yeah.
But to go back into the conversation about capacity, one of the key ideas that I like to communicate is capacity is relative. Okay. And what I mean by that is what takes one person 30 minutes to complete may take another person 2 hours to complete. Right. And the person that does the work in 30 minutes may produce a better work product than the person who produced the work in 2 hours. Right. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at capacity at a business level, we can't do so effectively without being more granular and looking at it as at the individual level. And the challenge there is the idea that as business owners, our tendency is going to always be to evaluate capacity as it pertains to our aptitude to complete the task. Like, how quickly can I do it? How long did it take me? And a lot of times that's not fair. Right? You're an expert. You've been doing this for 10 years and you wrote the daggum procedures. Right. Mm-hmm. And so dialing that back a little bit, I think, is important when you're trying to evaluate team member capacity.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom there in that. I went from start to finish on a file for brand new coverage for a firm so fast it made my head spin. And I shout out to Ryan on that. One of the reasons I could is because our technical guy had built some crazy great processes that were automated, right? But it was funny, the guy I was working with, the support team member, when we were done, he was shocked. He's like, I asked him, did you know we could do that? And Ryan, a lot of times he'll say, look, guys, if you went back 3 years ago and see how we were doing it, you would appreciate where we're at today. Same thing you're doing there, getting back there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, with the evolution of it all is really what we're talking about, which I think really gets lost a lot, Scott, in when we're thinking about the entrepreneurial journey and development to scale and all of that. And for you, what do you see as some of your personal growth in evolution of thinking, maybe leading your team? I think we're seeing a lot of it here, but there might be some key things when you're thinking back over your development.
Yeah.
What can you share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one habit that I have been trying to adopt, and depending on who you ask, they will tell you whether or not I'm doing so effectively, is learning to accept my team members' ideas as equal to and sometimes better than my own. Early on, I viewed my ideas as the end-all, be-all of the business. But as we've progressed and I've realized the importance of giving team members the space to present and document and test their ideas. And I think that's critical, not only for the purpose of having the team members feel valued, but also to acknowledge that no one has all the answers. And I make the joke sometimes as an expert, just because you think you know it all doesn't mean you have to act like one. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've been focusing on. And that's also a part of letting go of control, right? If I think that my idea is the way that we're going to go and that's it, that's final every single time, then what type of culture am I fostering in terms of team member participation? And what type of arrogance am I giving off in my position of quote unquote power in the organization? Am I alienating people and making them think that I'm a you-know-what and they don't want to work here anymore? And so I think that's one of the places that I've grown the most. Okay. And on the flip side, this is the key here. When the team member's idea does get implemented and the results were not as good as what your idea would have produced, don't make them feel as if, they are responsible for that thing that went wrong or that setback that's going to cost us a couple of extra dollars. Making them feel that you are still glad that they presented that idea. You're still glad that idea was implemented, even though in the back of your mind you think yours might have been better. Right? But still continuing that positivity throughout the course of that interaction so you don't inadvertently discourage that team member from bringing new ideas going forward.
That's huge.
Right. The balancing it all out. Oh, this is hard work. Reminds me of a quote somebody says, "This isn't rocket science, this is harder."
True.
Rocket science is important and hard, but
there's a mathematical calculation. It's either right or wrong at the end of the
right.
With rocket science, with this, there is no right or wrong. It's just making the best decision you have with the information at the time and living with the consequences. And so it is potentially harder than rocket science.
Yeah.
I think it's also, Scott, what you're saying. I love what you said. It's also so important to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you at doing certain things and not being afraid to be humbled, not being afraid to be like, hey, you know what? You know how to execute on this way better than me. So I trust you. I value you as a team member. I want you to just take that and solve that problem the way that you would, that you feel is best. And there's a lot of trust that comes with that. So I love what you're saying is you want to encourage people to think outside the box, not be afraid to take risks, and be okay with those decisions that are made. And if you make a mistake, that's the way you learn. Hopefully it's not a really expensive mistake, but mistakes aren't always bad, right? Mistakes can be a learning experience and they make you better. And I think that's really important for entrepreneurs to remember, because I know that's something that's really hard for me I struggle with that quite a bit.
Yeah, I do too, because I still keep the expensive decisions to myself, right? I don't know. We're not talking about the large reinvestments. Maybe we'll talk about reinvestment here in a minute, right? Those get my final call, but there's a lot of opportunities to allow team members to share ideas and impact the business. Yeah,
it's one of the things we're finding as we grow. The beauty of it is we get a little bit more scale. We have a little bit more capacity, which gives us a little bit wider berth sometimes to do that, or at least it helps free me up to say, okay, now it's just a mental growth for myself to make sure that I have that freedom and I give it away to team members. The funny thing about that is just this morning I was talking with a team member and I could see the light bulb come on for a minute. And I know he knew the concept, but it came back up and I'm like, that's great. And yes, absolutely. A no is not a failure. It's a learning opportunity, which was great. In this case, the no wasn't me saying no. It was the system giving feedback that we didn't hit a target. But anyhow, it was our funny little way of development and growth, which those dots started get connected. And ultimately, we all want to be a great leader and help our teams grow and develop. And that's what's fun. Wow. We've hit a lot of great stuff today.
Yeah.
Scott.
Good stuff.
I feel a part two coming for another time, because
we may need a part two. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We could talk about this stuff for hours. What you guys shared today is so valuable to anyone who maybe might be struggling or having some challenges that you guys just talked about today and just put it on the table, I think there's so much value in what you guys both shared today that I think people can really take that away. And if they execute on some of these ideas and they test it out and try it, and I think that's where the real value is, not just hearing something, but actually taking something that you hear or learn and implementing what you're learning. And that's the beauty of doing what we do and that's where the magic happens.
Agreed.
Absolutely. So when we land this plane, we like to come up with a question that's a little bit broader, helps us see a little bit more personally what we know or what we want to see in the long run. And so, Scott, you're welcome to ask me this question too. But the question really goes along the lines of when you and I have got a few more years ahead of us of doing this work, which is great. But if you can think down there several years down the road and you're sitting on your porch or out at the lake or whatever you enjoy to do at the end of the day, and you look back, this is what you're known for. This is what Synergy is known for. What does that look like to you, or what do you want that to be?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. In the end, I hope that when folks look back, they'll say that Synergy operated with honesty and integrity and transparency, right? We are a compliance consulting firm, and at the very core of compliance is ethics. Sure, we'll make a mistake from time to time, right? But were we open and honest about that mistake? We're going to miss a task, but we'll miss a deadline from time to time. But were we genuine in our response to that missed task or deadline? And so really, if I could sum it all up in one word, it's one of our core values. Really, if I could sum it up all in one word, it's one of our core values is accountability. I want folks to say that Synergy, for better or for worse, we held ourselves accountable for both the service experience and for the advice that we provided during our consulting engagements. So that's the way that I hope we're viewed.
That's great.
Yeah. Chad, I'm going to ask you the question because you're typically my co-host, but I want to ask you this question if you don't mind. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, great. Chad, you and I have known each other for many years now. I want you to imagine that you are on a walk in the woods. You're in retirement. You're looking back on your life. You're looking back on your legacy. And when you're thinking about that, I want you to imagine, what would you want people to remember you by? What do you want your legacy personally to be? Not box professional, but you as a person and a human.
Yeah. So that's funny because I just had my 50th birthday and it was amazing because people came out of the woodwork and told me all kinds of nice things, which was fun. It was like my wife said, I hope it doesn't feel like a wake or something like that. And I said, well, hey, at least I got to hear it. But no, really the one that touched me the most was actually a good friend of mine. And she said, Chad came out and helped me with my car. And he was my Ranger Rick helping me out or whatever, something like that. But when I think it's along those same lines. Okay. And I really enjoy business and business development. And I think America can use a lot of that, the entrepreneurial spirit. So I really hope, for me personally, though, it really comes down to, I hope people think back and say, look, this guy helped other people be successful. Okay. And personally, that takes the form of maybe helping them in the day-to-day, but also in the long run, they look back and they say, wow, Chad was able to help here and here, and did it not in an arrogant way, but was just like a buddy that's there to help you do a good job. And not for my benefit, but for that individual. They just feel well supported. Yeah. Did I help? I guess personally, what I would also love is if there were some businesses that were able to say, look, we were to get like from here to here. And that's my real dream. Because I, as a reformed accountant controller type person, some metrics that go along with that would be cool, but feeling the love and the help personally would get it.
I'm going to say this without getting overly emotional, Chad.
Okay.
Because you and I have known each other so long here, and you and I are co-hosts on this show, we work very closely together. I can say this to you, that you have lived up to that legacy with me personally.
Oh, well, thank you. I wasn't expecting that today. That's very kind.
I truly mean that. Like I don't sometimes think you realize the impact, the positive impact that you've made on me as a man, as a leader, as a business owner myself, just by your presence and having conversations with you.
Well,
in many ways, what you just described about yourself, I can already say that I've been the recipient of how you live your life. So thank you.
Thank you. And the coolest thing is with guys like Scott, because Scott, to me, we got the same heart there with that, Scott. That's what I get from you, too.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head when you said you want to be there to grow with businesses, right? One of my proudest accomplishments thus far has been our retention. I've got some firms that I've been working with since 2017, 2018, even before my time at Synergy. And just being able to continue to grow with those firms means so much to me, because it means not only do they value the relationship the same way that I do, but they also see that we are putting forth every single effort to continue to create new and creative solutions as their firm changes. If we're able to do that, if we're able to evolve along with our clients, then that's where the success lies. And that's where I'm 45. So maybe somebody will come to my 50th and say some nice stuff about me one day, I hear shortly. So yeah, same page, brother, same page.
Very cool.
Guarantee you they will. Well, listen, we are so honored and grateful, Scott, to have you on this show. I feel like we hit it out of the park again, but I don't know how we're doing it, Chad, but we're getting some absolutely rock star guests. And Scott, you truly are the man, the entrepreneur, the leader that I think people can really rally around, and you embody all that in everything you speak and the things that you shared today. I'm truly honored and grateful for you joining us today. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, let's do it again. I had a wonderful time. Thanks, guys.
And we will.
Thank you,
now,
Scott.
by the way, for everybody who's listening and watching today, I'll definitely put all the links. If you want to reach out to Scott and you want to have a conversation with him and feel like he could be of value to you, I'll put all those links in the show notes so you guys can reach out and talk directly to Scott and his team. And guys, listen, another great show. I'm trying to clear the lump out of my throat after what I just shared with Chad. I truly meant that. That's the beauty. That's the beauty of entrepreneurship, is developing those deep, meaningful relationships with people who are on the same journey as you, maybe not necessarily on the same path, but heading in that direction of where you want to go, and just being a high achiever, a goal-oriented person, and wanting to make a positive impact on the world that you have this opportunity to and blessing to be around. So guys, thank you so much, and look forward to the next episode of the Advisor's Edge podcast. We'll see you guys again soon.
See you soon.
Awesome.